Pressure group ASEPA take their struggle against compilation of new voters registered to Asantehene Otumfuo Osei-Tutu II as they file a detailed petition.
So we came and we did our presentation. Justifiably, Asanteman decides that they would also listen to the EC, and so then they will see what advice they can offer, which I think is fair.
We also hear from the Dankwa Institute, which has branded the NDC fight against the new voters register a threat to our democracy. Also tonight here on Top Story, we bring you the politics as the NDC holds a press conference today accusing government officials of looting COVID-19 funds. We hear from the party's spokesperson on finance.
The least opportunity, even in times of epidemic, functionaries of this administration seize an opportunity to loot and share, create, loot and share.
We also hear from the MPP's national chairman, who is fighting off claims that President Akufo-Addo eased coronavirus restrictions to advance what the NDC calls his election rigging agenda.
They are wrong in what they are saying. Nobody is conspiring to rig, definitely not MPP. Unless they want to say that why they were conspired to rig, we wouldn't do so.
This is Top Story with Evans Mensah.
And Top Story is always brought to you by Bond Savings and Loans. Your success, our passion. This is brought to you by Gas and Cement, the nation building Vodafone. The future is exciting, ready. Well, tonight the policy think tank Imani Africa and pressure group ASEPA have taken their struggle against the compilation of the new voters register to Asantehene Otumfuo Osei-Tutu II. Now, the Civil Society Coalition want the Mensah Palace to intervene to stop the Electoral Commission from proceeding with the controversial exercise set to begin later this month. Now, listen to the president of Imani Africa, Franklin Kujo, laying out their case in a petition they filed with the Asantehene today.
Well, don't forget, we are not against registration of people to vote. I think we've said it time without number that the cost claims that the EC makes does not justify the procurement of a new register. We've said time without number that the existing biometric verification machines that we have are in good fit for running the elections. We've said that the biometric verification machines have continuously been improved since 2016. They spent close to $60 million, actually more than $60 million in updating the verification machines. The EC's own documents, the Ministry of Finance document, the parliamentary documents bear us out. In fact, the Auditor General's documents show that consistently the EC has spent money up until 2018 to update the register and has bought lots of these machines for its work. How all of a sudden these machines are all decrepit and kaput? It's just too difficult to bear. And to think that they want to spend close to $200 million in procuring new systems simply because they claim that they want to introduce another layer of verification, which is the facial recognition, is in itself the least of what the existing systems can do. In fact, the existing system has far more superior systems of identifying people than just facial recognitions. Well, I don't know whether because people are going to wear masks these days, you probably want to find out people's faces. But that's not the point. And I think we've also said time with that number that the procurement processes that led to the purchase of these new equipment themselves were fraught with a lot of irregularities, right? Now, people who believe that, well, maybe the cost issues have been overexpressed, and so we need a new register, have also not given us any good ground. The EC has never, for once, suggested that the register is bloated. They've never done that.
So that is Franklin Kujuda, is the president of Imani Africa. On the telephone line with me, my colleague Kusi Deborah, who was at the Mensah Palace today. Deborah, did we get a sense what the Otumfuo, the Mensah Palace, made of this petition? From what I understand, it even went beyond a simple petition.
Yes, Evans, as you heard from Franklin Kujuda, when they went there, they did a full presentation, covered about 2 hours, of why, putting in the arguments, why they are supposed to maintain the existing biometric system. And of course, the whole thing was that it has reached about 95% perfection, and so there's no need to change it. And so, from a Santaman Council, they are done with their presentation, and so it's left with the EC. And what we hear is that a Santaman Council is going to call the EC to also, come with their presentation, and so they can pound the gavel on it. So that is what's happening now. They're going to call the EC for them to also come to Mensah Palace.
Okay, but was Otumfuo himself in attendance when this presentation was made? Do we know that?
There's a closed-door meeting, and it was only the hints of presentation that we had. But with the Otumfuo, we had the information initially Otumfuo wasn't around, so we can't really tell whether he came later on. But what we heard initially was that the presentation was done in front of the Santaman Council with the absence of Otumfuo. Yes, it's Otumfuo.
Thank you very much, Deborah, the reporting from the Ashanti region. Well, also today, another civil society group, the Pro-NPP Dankwa Institute, also addressed a news conference today where they laid out their own concerns with the way the main opposition National Democratic Congress is also taking on the issues with regards to the voters register. Now, according to the Dankwa Institute, the NDC's is a threat to our democracy because of the approach that they're taking in registering their protest and resistance against the new voters register. Listen to Executive Director Richard Ahiagba.
This register ought to have been replaced in 2014 or 2016, while we do not wish to dictate to or determine how the EC remedies the 2012 register compiled under CI 72. We demand the EC to be guided by the Supreme Court's interpretation of Article 45A in the Abu Ramadan and Evans Mensah case, that to the extent that we know, even today, that there are people on the electoral roll with the NHIA card as their base document of identification or as a form of proof of qualification, which according to the Supreme Court are not legible to be on the register, there cannot be any reasonable justification whatsoever, be it cost, time, procurement difficulties, or even COVID-19, to defend the use of such a register. Any attempt, as it appears some groups have committed themselves, is clearly an assault on our democracy, the rule of law and conscience. Such persons are purveyors of illegality and an imminent threat to our fledgling democracy. This 2012 register, whose compilation was primarily guided by CI 72, is not reasonably accurate and should be replaced.
Mr. Ahiagba joins us on the telephone line. Mr. Ahiagba, thank you for your time here on Top Story.
Thank you, Candy.
You say that those who are opposed to this, and I guess the NDC is a lead in this, that somehow their approach is anti-democratic and a threat to our democracy. How so? They are using constitutional legal means to register their protests, including protests, press conferences, etc. How is that an affront to our democracy?
Well, thank you. The very thing they are trying to use the legal constitutional means to register their protest about is illegal. That is the basis, and that's why they are a threat to our democracy, and that's why they must be resisted by every means, and all of us Ghanaians
You have to explain that position. The very thing they are resisting, the compilation of a new voters register?
No, the register itself, because they are opposed to the compilation of a new register. That is their position.
Yes.
And I'm saying that document that they're trying to defend, that document they are trying to go to court to protect, is itself an illegal document. It's a document that is discredited. If you look at
it's discredited
because legally the processes engaged in to compile that register. If you take the CI 72, which is supposed to be the regulatory document for compiling that register in 2012, the EC went ahead and allowed for people to use baptismal certificates, birth certificates, which were not included and authorized by the Act of Parliament, which is the CI 72. The EC, however, allowed for that to be used. That is illegal. That's unlawful. Two, if the CI is passed and that is supposed to regulate the compilation of register, and the EC goes ahead to tell its officials that go ahead, register people, a proof of qualification, which is clearly identified in the CI, and in the TI, then the EC tells its officials, don't worry about taking proof of qualification. It's not mandatory. That document, as a result, is not constitutional. It's not legal. It frowns, it actually contradicts the directions of Parliament. On that account, we're saying that that document cannot be acceptable, and all people of conscience should see that and say this is so acceptable.
But Mr. Ahiagba, the EC itself, one time after the Supreme Court verdict, took their time to clean the register. On the basis we use the same register, which was cleaned partially for several, at least, the referendum that we held last year.
And
there are processes other than the compilation for new voters register that designed in a legal structure to achieve that end of cleaning a register that you believe has issues.
Yeah. But Evans, if you take the CI 72, can you tell me how you determine somebody who uses NHIA card to register? Can you tell me? You have a copy, I'm sure, but look at it and see if it told you who used NHIA card. Apart from what they provided to record the numbers for people who use national identification card, which at the time, if you want, you can count the people who had it on one hand. But apart from that, there is no other documentation or record of who used NHIA card to register in 2012. There is no record of who used passport. There's no record of who used voters register. So you tell me how they deleted the supposed people who used the NHIA. By the way, the EC's defense in court was that there were millions of people who used the NHIA as a basis for registration, and therefore, if the court accepted for that document to be declared invalid, then millions of Ghanaians were going to be disenfranchised. Now, you tell me 56,772, is that equal to millions? Is that what we're talking about? So clearly, there's no basis even to trust the exercise they did, because the document they used to take that registration does not tell you who used NHIA card to register.
Now,
so in essence, how were they able to delete those people? And if that doubt presents itself to us, the only way to remedy that is to create a new register, because you cannot tell who used NHIA. And I tell you, we have been running polls. We have been talking to people, and there are people who say they have their registration proof as NHIA, and they're still on the register. In fact,
these are issues that, over the last many months had come up consistently. We're still not yet anywhere close to resolving this in the way that will build consensus. An approach I've adopted tonight is for Imani and ASEPA, another colleague, think tank groups, taking a petition to the Mensah Palace and doing a presentation there. Isn't that an approach that I guess will help, other than the many press conferences that we're hearing, including what DI just did today? You backed a move like that?
Well, the point of the matter is this, that going to Mensah is a good idea. We should encourage all of that. But the question is a very fundamental one. Is this register fit for purpose? If we look at our laws and what our public institutions are supposed to do in law, in compliance, have this register and the people who compiled it complied with the law? One, if you have a CI that says you use passport, you use voter ID, you use NHIA card, and that, and you go in your execution to add baptismal certificate against the dictate of Parliament, that document cannot be said to be valid. This is a legal position. You cannot move away from that and try to achieve consensus. Otherwise, then we'll have a situation where the law is relative.
So do I hear you say on this,
the law is relative?
do I hear you say on this matter categorically that there's no need to build consensus on what the best way forward is?
We cannot negotiate on law, except it's not right. If it's not right, then it's wrong. But if we're talking as a matter of compliance, and we don't want to create bad precedent in this country, that some group of people can go against the law, and then that will be okay. But the act of Parliament to be disregarded in this nature, we don't think that it's reasonable to just sweep it under the carpet. We are saying that to the extent the EC lied in open court, in fact, lied to the Supreme Court that it had processes to eliminate people who use NHIA card to register, when in fact the CI it relied on to compile the register did not show any means of doing that. That is a basis to say that this one is wrong. Because you know what? We must come to a point where we call a spade a spade.
Okay. I'm grateful. That's Richard Ahiagba, he's Executive Director of the Dankwa Institute. They had held a news conference today on this matter. Two other civil society groups, Imani and the SEPA, took their struggle to the Mensah Palace and did a presentation to the Sentiment Council and to the 2402 the second. Now, to our story we are following for you tonight, the National Democratic Congress is tonight asking the Auditor General to commission a special audit into the utilization of more than 200 million cedis set aside by government to support the poor and vulnerable affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. At a news conference today, the minority spokesperson on finance, Kesela Tefolson, accused some government and MPP functionaries of looting the COVID-19 alleviation funds.
Clearly, the least opportunity, even in times of epidemic, functionaries of this administration seize an opportunity to loot and share, create, loot and share. To the extent that market women felt that eggs that was meant to support or cushion the ordinary Ghanaian during difficult times were sent to the market for someone to profit from it is shameful. For me, we call on His Excellency the President to, as a matter of urgency, take actions against the functionaries of the administration that has been involved in this act. As a responsible opposition, with the responsibility of protecting the public purse and ensuring the judicious utilization of state resources, the NDC calls on the Auditor General of Ghana to undertake a special audit into the expenditure of the amount of 280.3 million Ghana cedis that was allocated for the provision of food, water and sanitation under the Coronavirus Alleviation Program, CAP. Specifically, we are demanding a special audit into the expenditure of the following three items. Number one, we are asking that the amount of 40 million Ghana cedis which was allocated for the procurement and distribution of food packages and hot meals to the vulnerable in the lockdown areas be investigated. We are also calling on the Auditor General that the amount of 40.3 million Ghana cedis which was allocated for the Ghana National Buffer Stocks Company for the procurement and distribution of dry food to the vulnerable in the lockdown areas be also be investigated. Again, we are saying that the amount of 200 million Ghana cedis allocated for the provision of water and sanitation, especially the amount spent on the supply of tankers of water to deprived households, be investigated. It is in the same spirit of transparency and accountability, we call on President Akufo-Addo to direct the trustees of the COVID-19 Trust Fund to provide a report to Ghanaians detailing the total amount of donations we have received so far, who contributed into the fund, and how the amount has been utilized to date.
Let's bring in Keisel Atofosing, who addressed this particular press conference. Mr. Forson, thank you for time on Top Story.
Thank you very much.
Isn't this call premature? The crisis is still very alive. A lot of the demands you're making are things that are still pretty active and process. For example, the fund, for example, is still being managed. Funds are still coming in. Isn't it premature to be making these demands at this time?
Even certainly no. The expenditures I detailed were meant for the lockdown period only. You recall that the first expenditure the government asked for to deal with it, the entire pandemic over the period, was 1.2 billion. I've not gone to the entire 1.2 billion. What I've said was that, look, you have 280 million Ghana cedis that you budgeted for the lockdown period, 3 weeks lockdown period only. The president has subsequently lifted the lockdown over a month. No one has come out to tell us what is happening, whether that amount was sufficient, whether it was used in a judicious manner, whether the amount that was actually voted was enough. Nobody has come out to say something like this.
But Mr. Atofosing, but my question to what you just said is, so you don't know, but I've heard you make an allegation today that some party functionaries and government operatives are looting these funds.
Thank you. Evans, I was going to go. You recall that an amount of 40.3 million was allocated to the National Buffer Stocks Company for the provision of dry food for the lockdown areas, Greater Kumasi, Accra, Kasua, and then Tema. And then also an amount of another 40 million Ghana cedis was also allocated for the provision of dry food during the period. During the lockdown 3 weeks period. After the lockdown period, we had reports from Kumasi, specifically Tafo Pankrono market women, recorded, and the matter was actually played on Silver FM in Kumasi. And they were complaining that the district or the municipal chief executive has sent people to come and sell eggs that were meant for the lockdown period.
How did they know that these eggs were meant for the lockdown period?
Oh, well, I'm not the one saying it. You heard the market women, and you see, in order
so you're repeating an allegation that is unverified.
No, I'm not repeating an allegation. This allegation, obviously, according to the market women, is a fact because they actually investigated
but isn't that the point?
Presiding member came to confirm it.
No, but
the presiding member of the assembly came to confirm it.
Yeah, but it's still an allegation, unconfirmed allegation.
Okay, you can call it whatever name. But the truth is that if you, as a responsible opposition, when you vote money worth 280.10 million Ghana cedis, that was actually designed in a way to benefit the ordinary Ghanaian, particularly the vulnerable. And you hear issues of corruption, and government has failed to actually respond to the matter. It hurts. To the extent that that money was actually donated and was actually given for a specific purpose to make the lockdown stress-free to the vulnerable. No wonder the amount that we voted, the sharing of food was in that manner. So in something like this, we are calling on the Auditor General to actually move in, ascertain the facts, and report to Ghanaians, because the government is actually failing to provide us some information on this matter, because it has been 3 weeks, more than 1 month since the lockdown was over. And Evans, the fact remains, we are not calling for a special audit on the entire 1.2 billion. We are calling on a special audit on the 280.3 million. This amount has already been expanded. This amount has actually been done with. So it cannot be said to be premature. We are only asking the Auditor General, as a matter of urgency, conduct a special audit on this matter and report to Parliament.
Have you written formally to the Auditor General?
We are going to, today was the press conference. We're following up with the letter, and hopefully by the end of tomorrow, the Auditor General is going to have the letter. But
also, as a member of Parliament, you have the power in the House to actually bring the sector minister or whichever agency was in charge of supervising the disbursement of these funds to give you answers on how the amounts have been used. You have?
We have. In fact, we asked a question. It's been more than 3 weeks, and then as we speak, there hasn't been any answer. We have actually, in fact, I've also asked at the Finance Committee level, and nothing is happening. So this is our last resort to call on the Auditor General to actually intervene and conduct a special audit. Because seriously, there's something that has gone very wrong with the way that money was actually disbursed. Something has certainly gone wrong. And that's why we're saying that Auditor General, proof, come in. Look, if I am, I will have come out.
But this is based on mere suspicion.
This is based on what we have heard. Based on what we have heard. And it's not like some group of people coming together. This is a market woman who apparently these eggs were given to them to sell. Actually, the cost to companies, how can we do such a thing? And we played the audio today. How can we do such a thing? This food was meant for us. You failed to give it to us. You brought it to us for us to sell and for you to profit from it. It's wrong. And if market women can stand up to this, why are we failing to call an Auditor General to investigate the matter? I mean, that is bad. In times of pandemic, you wanted, the ordinary Ghanaian to feel comfortable at home and obey the protocols. Yet you could not share the money, the food, stuff, and hot food in a way that will encourage them to stay at home. That is shameful. And that is why we are calling the Auditor General to investigate this matter and actually provide a special audit report to Parliament so that we can all deliberate upon.
Well, I'm grateful. That's Case Lato Forsing, a former finance minister, spokesperson for the minority on finance. We had reached out to the government to get some clarity on this. We had to get hold of a spokesperson. When we do, we'll bring that to you. Also today, we're hearing from the national chairman of the NPP, Mr. Freddie Blay, who has been responding to allegations still at this particular press conference that the president's decision to ease the COVID-19 restrictions, which he announced last night, have been designed to aid his alleged election rigging agenda. Listen to Freddie Blay.
Well, it's their press subject. I've told you since the last quarter of last year now, the favorite subject has been the voter register that they are doing, and they take every opportunity now to canvass their position. I've said that the media and all other platforms are giving that oxygen, but it's cherry picking. We all are aware that the COVID-19 has imposed several restrictions on all aspects of our life, and this is one of the ways of relaxing it. And the president has come out mentioned that gradually we are going to relax on some of such restrictions so that life can come to normalcy, dependent on to what extent the virus will be contained. Now, when the president has come out of this beautiful idea, and it's allowing the government, based on advice that is allowing these things, they should show the compilation of the new voter register as a subject they want to talk about. I think that's their big, but definitely I believe they are wrong in what they are saying. Nobody is conspiring to rape, definitely not MPP, unless they want to say that why they were conspired to rape, we wouldn't do so.
And that is Freddie Blay. He is the national chairman of the NPP, and he was speaking on the Joy News Election 2020 news program on the Joy News channel, hosted by Araba Kungsing at 1:30.